I want to welcome you all. My name is Elizabeth Aloni, and I'm with Schneps Media. Schneps Media is the largest local media company in the New York metro area. We publish over 70 newspapers, magazines, websites, webinars, podcasts, and events throughout Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Manhattan, Westchester, Long Island, and Philadelphia. Today, I am personally thrilled to be able to present this webinar, Thriving in a Virtual World, Making Video Games and Zoom Work for You. I personally can attest to Dr. Kimberly Berens' incredible ability to work with children and her incredible insight into education. Dr. Kimberly Berens is the author of Blind Spots, I have right here, Why Students Fail and the Science That Can Save Them. She is the founder of Fit Learning, which is a powerful system of instruction based on and in behavioral science. And she's an undying advocate for the transformation of the educational system. Welcome, Dr. Kim. Thrilled to have you here with us.
Hi, thanks. It's good to be here with you again.
Absolutely, for sure. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your mission.
Yeah. Well, God, it's been a marathon. They always say it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? So I started, this work actually as an undergraduate. When I was in college, I was, a psychology major, and I discovered behavioral science. I, took a course in learning my freshman year. And, I come from a long line of scientists, people in the medical field and people, my mother was, a biologist. And so I had come from a long line, I was interested in the hard sciences, but I was also interested in, why humans do the things they do. And my father was a psychiatrist. So I kind of was like marrying the two things with psychology, but I wasn't that jazzed about a lot of psychology, all the theories and those kinds of things. So when I took my first course in learning, it was one of those moments where, like a lightning bolt goes off and you realize that you found your calling. And I, was blessed enough to go to a small liberal arts college where I, the woman who taught that course became my mentor. And it was really like I really became a graduate student, almost an undergrad, because I worked with her so closely. And I pretty immediately started working in the applying that science to, human problems as an undergrad. So I started working with adults with profound disabilities, and then I moved into working with children with autism. And so my early work in the early 90s was really, centered around using our science to, improve the quality of life for disabled populations. And then I, began my doctoral training, and I, became more and more shocked and disheartened that our science was pretty much unknown with respect to mainstream education. And that has always been a passion for me. And so I was shocked that, we were really well known when it came to dealing with humans with real significant problems. But when it came to using the science of learning, which is what behavioral science is, to accelerate and improve learning outcomes with every type of child in mainstream schools, that's not what happens. And so, that's when my mission really started as a graduate student. And so I actually started Fit Learning, my organization, in a literal janitor's closet as a graduate student, because I wanted to apply our science to academics and the acceleration of cognitive skills with kids. So I really started like an after-school tutoring program. Just volunteered my time. And I was really only working with faculty's kids, faculty from the university where I was getting my doctoral degree. And then over time, because we use science and we are applying the science of learning to learning, which makes sense, we started developing a pretty amazing reputation very quickly. And so over time, more and more people started bringing their kids from the community. And then all of a sudden, before I knew it, we had, we kept getting moved from the university to bigger and bigger spaces. We graduated out of the janitor's closet. And so over time, we became a pretty large, bustling organization. And I eventually privatized the program, when I off campus and finished my doctoral degree, and that became my career. And so, from one small little place in a closet, we now have, more than 30 locations worldwide, and we work with thousands of kids a year, and we produce a year's growth in 40 hours of training. So, and that's what's possible when you're applying science to instruction. And unfortunately, that's not what happens in schools, and that's not how teachers are trained. just to be clear, I wasn't an education major. I didn't get my doctorate in education. I got my doctorate in behavioral science. And so I'm not trained as a traditional educator. And sadly, this is not the kind of training that happens in the College of Education. So teachers aren't getting access to training in the scientific process that underlies learning, of which we know a lot about now. We have almost a century of science on our side about how learning actually occurs. And it's still not how teachers are trained, and it's not how schools are designed. So that's why my mission has been to develop this organization, not only so that we can help a ton of kids, but so that we can do the science on our approach and demonstrate its power, such that stakeholders in education and policymakers might be more likely to finally get the importance of reforming schools such that science is what is the guiding principle. And again, it's a marathon. It hasn't happened yet, but we're trying, and we're making headway.
It's particularly germane now as we look at the importance of science, as we're in the middle of a pandemic. And this information is so powerful. And today we're going to have an opportunity to see how we can look at it practically, and how we can get things started in our homes and in our schools, so that children can access science as a way to learn. So, Dr. Kim, before the pandemic, parents were faced with video game addiction, screen addiction. And now with online learning, it feels like it's getting out of control. And as a parent, I feel like I'm always battling the evils of screens.
Yes.
You, though, wrote an article recently for Working Mother magazine where you talked about the other side of addiction and what it says about learning. Can you share? It's amazing. What can you share about that with me?
Yeah. And so, that is something. When I wrote the article, I will say that, there's so much that's out there kind of circulating in the world about all the negatives, right? Pediatricians and psychologists, it's all bad news for parents about, too much screen time, and video games, promote violence. And, so it's always bad news about video games. But, again, remember, I'm a behavioral scientist and actually an instructional designer. And so when I look at video games in a very different way. And so, what I will say is, what I say in the article is that, the educational establishment could learn a lot from the design of video games, because there's a reason children become addicted to them. And the reason children become, and not just children, are you kidding me? Like my director in New York City, her fiance, and they're in their 30s, is also a big Xboxer, so gamer or whatever. So this isn't just kids, but I guess I should say the reason humans become addicted to video games is because of the way they are designed. And I will tell you that video game designers are informed by behavioral science. Video game designers are informed about the science behind the learning process, which is why, number one, kids become extremely proficient at playing video games. There is a reason for that. And because they become extremely proficient at playing video games, they become addicted to video games. And not only is it because they become good at playing them, but it's because there are also other types of what we call in behavioral science reinforcers, or consequences that make behavior more likely to occur, which is what a reinforcer is. So those kinds of consequences are built into video games. For instance, you're earning points, you're earning access to new worlds, you're earning access to new weapons or new cars or whatever kind of, my son is a huge gamer, so I do know this stuff, but
I hear
there's a lot of payoffs built into the game. And so, to be honest with you, all of the elements that are missing from how teaching happens in schools are what are actually intentionally built into games, which is why they are unbelievably successful and why it's a billion-dollar industry. Because the people who design those games design them based on science, and they design them based on the science behind the learning process. Unlike our educational system, which is based according to traditions and beliefs about how kids learn, not the science behind how it actually happens, but beliefs that have been in place for a century. These, beliefs about how kids learn stuff, which aren't true and they're not real, but that's how schools are designed. And so because of that, We have a systemic and historical, pattern of failure in our educational system, which is non-existent when it comes to becoming proficient at playing a video game. So that my article is really laying out how video games are designed, why they promote mastery, and why they produce kids' desire to consistently play them. And those same principles should be built into academic training, and they're not. And so rather than it being all bad news, it's actually good news. If your kids are proficient video gamers, there is nothing wrong with their ability to learn. And I can't tell you, in my over 20-year career at Fit Learning, I have worked with thousands of children who come to me with deficits in reading and mathematics, critical thinking and writing. They can't read, they can't do math, they can't think, and they can't write well. But guess what? They can play, they are the most proficient video gamers you've ever met. And they're labeled with learning disabilities. And there's nothing that infuriates me more. There is nothing wrong with your child's ability to learn if they become adept at playing a video game. What's wrong is how they're being instructed in academic areas. It has no, and when they fail academically, that failure is put on the kid as if it's something wrong with the child, rather than it's something wrong with the way teaching practices are designed and schools are designed. So it's kind of like a whole new way of looking at this video game issue that I really think is a powerful thing for parents and educators and stakeholders to know.
I mean, it's completely fascinating, and it's mind-blowing to think about that, and to think about that, if someone is not good at learning, that would be across everything. If someone's not good at learning, it wouldn't be just happen to be at school. Nope. It would be in all these other areas. And so that's a great hint to it's not the child, which is
exactly. And look, and it's very clear. I mean, I've worked with a lot of kids with profound disabilities in my career. And kids with profound disabilities, real neurological impairments, they struggle to learn how to play video games. They struggle to learn anything. They struggle to learn daily living skills. They struggle to learn language. Their learning issues are systemic. It's the kids I see that are unbelievably proficient at video games, and it goes beyond that. Like, I have kids who come into Fit and they are unbelievable with their ability to build the most complex Lego structures. Like they play, they're really amazing at building these amazing things with Legos. And some of them have gotten so good that they don't even have to use the instructions anymore for these really complex things. They kind of do them on their own. Wow. And these kids are labeled as dyslexic or dyscalculate, they have dyscalculia labels, and I cannot believe it. I'm like, I am sorry. That is the most absurd thing I've ever heard of in my life. And it happens every single day for me. Like, I calls day after day from parents. And one of the first things I ask is, okay, so your child struggles to read. How are they at video games? Or what do they do really well? And they'll list off stuff. And I'm like, yeah, okay, so your kid doesn't have a learning problem. There's nothing, all of that requires learning. The problem is the instruction. And because that's rarely even considered when kids fail academically, which is why I had to write a whole book about this. It's never called into question. The teaching practices are never called into question. The traditions that dominate our schools are never called into question. The first thing that is looked at is what's wrong with the kid. They're lazy. They're not trying. They have dyslexia. They have some mythological learning problem that only shows up with reading or only shows up with math. That's not how the brain works. So it's just the most ridiculous. Like, if you really think about it, what I also love is how many parents I get, they go from crying to laughing. When they first call me, it's devastation. They're devastated. They have tried every single service. They have been told that their kids will never learn to read well because of this disability. They've been sold down the river with all this garbage. And so when they first call me, it's tears and sadness and upset and rage. And then when I really put it to them in this way, it becomes almost like laughter, like how ridiculous it actually is that they ever believed the garbage they've been fed from the educational establishment, when they really think about how many amazing things their kids have learned to do outside of the school system. So, I mean, there's one variable here, and the variable is that all the stuff the school's responsible for is what kids struggle to learn. Kids don't struggle to learn stuff that happens outside of schools. I mean, it's just, hello. I mean, let's look at this scientifically. What's the variable? The schools. So that's the variable.
So you are not bashing teachers. I
No.
want to make that clear, because what you're saying is it's really the foundation of what education has been built
Yes.
on, and the way that society has been teaching teachers to teach,
Yep.
which has not been science-based, and therefore it's not as successful. Kids do well because they're lucky that they do well, not so much that because the way of the instruction is
Right.
how it's scientific. So
I mean, I'll tell you, there's with coming back to the teacher issue, and look, there's plenty of teachers who absolutely get this. Like, there are plenty of teachers who get these kids do not have enough repeated reinforced practice of skills to mastery before they're pushed along to a higher skill. Because again, one of the most tragic traditions in our school system is the following arbitrary timelines that are set by school boards. Kids have to meet these certain standards throughout the year, regardless of whether they've mastered them. Like, so, you're exposed to a bunch of content, you're tested on that content, and regardless of your performance, you're moved ahead to higher level stuff because the district says you're supposed to. And a majority of teachers know it's absurd. A majority of teachers hate the fact that they have to follow an arbitrary timeline when they know that very few kids in their class are ready to move on, but they have no choices. They have no ability to be the one in charge in the classroom because they're following arbitrary timelines, number one. So even teachers who get this and want to build in more practice and want to spend more time on a lesson because they know their students aren't ready, they can't, because they are not empowered to act like scientists. They're required to follow stupid rules and timelines that are set by an establishment. So teachers are tragic victims of this because, number one, their training is inadequate because they're not trained in behavioral science a majority of the time. And even if they do get it, they can't do anything about it because they have to follow rules that have nothing to do with kids being effective. And I mean, kids being educated effectively, and everything to do with checking off arbitrary boxes that districts set for education that have nothing to do with achieving outcomes. Because let me be clear, if all of those stupid guidelines that are put into place by districts, if that had to do with being effective, we wouldn't have more than 60% of American school children below proficiency, which is what the current statistic is. So all of the arbitrary stuff districts don't produce effective outcomes. That's not what it produces. So it's all about traditions and bureaucracy and not about effectiveness. For sure.
Very frustrating and enlightening, and makes me want to say, so how can we, use these techniques? How can educators use these techniques to be more effective? And also, as parents, how can we advocate for this type of learning to be incorporated in our schools?
Well, I think that, for me to make this point, let's go back to the video game thing, because most parents are pretty familiar with video games. So let's think about how a video game, just any video game, works. So a kid, starts to play, let's say a kid starts to play a new game and they've never played it before. So you may have a screen where some rules are provided to you, right? Like there's some rules written across the screen, like use this key to do this and use that key to do that. And, here's the goal of this level, whatever it may be. There's some rules, right? And you can kind of interpret those rules as like a lecture a teacher would give a kid on a concept, right, in academics. So that's kind of the parallel. So like the game is like presenting the concept of the game and how to play it. Okay. So after that happens, what happens next? In every single video game, a child goes into a phase where they practice doing what the instructions said. So they're like, okay, we're going to practice using the jump key. We're going to practice using the shoot key. We're going to, whatever. So there's these practices, right? And kids get to practice. So they kind of know, oh, okay. So they said this and now I actually did it. And when I did it, I was paid off because it worked, right? And it produced an outcome. And so then after they go through some little intro screen, they go into level 1. So in level 1 of a game, what happens? A kid, there's some strategy that has to happen. And in order for a kid to access level 2, they always have to meet requirements. It's not like they just play level 1 for a little while and then they get access to level 2. No, it doesn't work like that. How it works is level 2 is a reward or a reinforcer for mastering level 1. meaning the kid has to get more adept at whatever the controls are doing. They have to, earn points or win things. I mean, it depends on the game, but they have to improve their performance to a mastery level before they access the next level. So what does that mean? That means repeated, reinforced practice to mastery. And then guess what happens? Then there's like, ding, 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 you've accessed level 2. You've accessed this new world. You've accessed this new character, whatever it may be. So then they go up, and guess what happens then? The game gets harder. So then the game increases in difficulty. And then what happens when the game increases in difficulty? It all repeats itself. They have to play it and get better and receive points and earn stuff. And once they get proficient at level 2, what happens again? The world opens up and they go to level 3. So they're not moving from level 1. They're not moving from level 1 to level like 15 based on time. And after watching someone lecture them on how the game is played and then taking a test on it, which is what happens in schools. No, they're given a little instruction, and then what do? They practice, they play it, they behave, and they have that repeated practice reinforced with lots of cool stuff in the world, like earning more points and earning more stuff. And then the ultimate goal is, guess what? You've accessed the next level. Because video game designers understand how learning works. Like, that's how learning works. We don't master anything without repeated reinforced practice. Nothing is mastered from a lecture. Nothing is mastered by sitting and watching someone like I'm doing to you. You're not going to leave this webinar being a master of behavioral science today. That's an absurd notion. Like, you'll have some better understandings and some distinctions, but you're not going to be a PhD in behavioral science after this webinar. It's ridiculous. So
can I play devil's advocate for a second? Because sure. I'm just thinking about, what a parent could think, or what I, would think, well, what about, okay, well, video games, they're fun.
Right.
So the kids like to play it, where, look, school's not as much fun. So right. How do you address that?
So I'll tell you right now at FIT, because, I do academic stuff all day long. Okay. So, but FIT learning is designed like video games because it's designed according to the science of learning. The reason school isn't fun is because, number one, there's no reinforcement. There's very little reinforcement built into the day. Number one. Number two, kids never get the opportunity to get really good at stuff. And when I mean really good at stuff, I'm talking about something we call fluency. And I know everyone knows what fluency is in the vernacular, right? Like, fluent in a second language. Fluency means automatic, effortless, second nature. But fluency is actually a technical term in behavioral science. And what it means is a level of mastery that predicts long-term memory, the ability to apply skills effortlessly for learning something more difficult. And it means that you have an increase in attention span. So you have resistance to distractions and fatigue. And fluency is a level of mastery that's produced by a very explicit type of reinforced practice. So at FIT, I'm not using video games. I design my instruction according to the science of learning like video gamers do. Kids, when let's say phonics, kids come to FIT and they've got silly diagnoses like, of dyslexia, but guess what? They can't identify their phonics sounds. So I'm using sheets of letters. They're not fun looking. They're literally letters, as many as they can get, like 130 letters on a sheet. And then we start a timer, and the kids practicing saying their sounds, and they're getting reinforcement and coaching during the timing. And then when the timer goes off, we look and see, okay, how many phonics did you get in that time period? And did you beat your personal best? So what was your previous score? And if you beat that previous score, guess what happens? You get points. You get you get a period of time where you can click points on a little golf counter. And then guess what? Kids earn all those performance requirements. They exchange those for fun stuff like Xbox gift cards, or I don't know. We have a lot of different reinforcement systems for kids, but the point is FIT learning is unbelievably fun. And it's fun because we use lots of reinforcement. And the reason school isn't fun is because kids are expected to do what we expect them to do. And if they don't do what we expect them to do, they're punished. But if they do what we expect them to do, there's not a lot of cool stuff that happens when they do it. So the reason school isn't fun is because of the way it's designed. Academics can be unbelievably fun. Are you kidding me? I have kids at FIT who get so fluent at programs like 60 math facts a minute. which is 1 a second, which is our fluency aim at FIT. Kids come in and when they're doing 60 math facts a minute, all they do is come in and say, hey, can I start with my math facts? Like, they want to do those programs because it is fun to be an expert. Like, that's what makes something fun. When you are really good at something, it is really fun. But to get kids really good at something, they have to practice it, and they have to practice it in the right way, and they have to practice it a lot. So to bridge the gap between being really bad at something and all the practice it takes to get really good at something, you got to use a lot of reinforcement. You got to use points. You got to use praise. You got to use, lots of encouragement and reinforce that behavior, because that's how learning works. And then once you get to the point of fluency, kids just want to do they just want to do that stuff. They want to read. They want to do their math facts. They want to solve. We do a lot of logical. Kids don't know how to think in this country. So we do a ton of work in logical problem solving and critical thinking. And kids want to just solve crazy logic problems, because they get so good at it. That's what makes things fun. The reason school isn't fun is because kids are consistently failing. It is boring. They're sitting there staring at the teacher doing all the talking, and they're just sitting there. That's why school's boring. Academics don't have to be boring and not fun. They're only boring and not fun when they're horribly designed, period.
I'm just thinking, like, my daughter got a 20 out of 20 on her math test, and she's been struggling with math. Yes. And she was so excited. She had to bust into my office the second she got home from school, and she was so excited.
So proud of her.
So that is an example right there that I think all of us as parents have experienced, where our children achieve something at school, and you see that, wow, look, that's exciting for them. So
Yeah.
you can see what you mean about how important it is to incorporate more and more of that.
But if kids are consistently failing, because here's the thing, when you have kids getting pushed along according to age and arbitrary timelines, so like a kid turns 6, and because they're 6 years old, they're ready for first grade, which is actually scientifically contraindicated. Age does not determine when kids acquire academic skills. Academic skills are a function of effective instruction and repeated reinforced practice and to mastery. So if you have a kindergartner who's still not identifying their letters fluently or identifying phonic sounds fluently and can barely sound out words, but then they're moved to first grade and they're expected to now do harder stuff, well, right there, you are already set up for that kid to hate school because they can never access reinforcement because they don't have the skills. So school becomes miserable. Why do you think truancy is a problem? School violence is a problem? School is a miserable place for a majority of kids because they don't have the skills to be successful. Not because there's something wrong with them, but because they haven't been provided the opportunity to truly master basic skills so that they can accelerate. They can advance up to higher level skills more easily and with success. That's why school is so profoundly, miserable for most kids because they fail most of the day.
I think there's a collective sigh of relief to know that as a parent, that it's not
something wrong with your child.
Right. So we're all chomping at the bit. We need to know how we can use these techniques at home.
Okay.
Because you talk about how you can have a more happy home, more productive home, helping our children with online learning. So many parents think they just need to punish their kids if they're not paying attention. Right. Please, how can we use these techniques at home to have success with our children and happiness?
Yes. So whenever I provide advice to parents, I always have to separate a can't do from a won't do. And I wrote an article for, I think it was in Thrive Global. I think it's in Thrive Global about can't do's versus won't do's. Those are really important distinctions to make because when we talk about using motivational systems or reinforcement systems with kids, reinforcement systems will only work if kids have the ability to perform the task or engage in the skill that we're expecting them to perform, right? So when I say a can't do versus a won't do, I mean this. Sometimes kids are whinging and whining and tantruming and engaging in avoidance around homework and schoolwork because they have profound skills deficits and they can't do those tasks, but they're being expected to behave as if they can. So that's a big problem. So like if you have a child, for instance, and this is, I'm telling you, a majority of people watching this, to be quite honest, because now the way the school system believes that the way to improve stuff is to make kids do more and harder things at younger and younger ages, which is absurd. So like now, before kindergarten was about identifying your letters and learning how to learning how to hold a pencil and write letters. Now, kindergartners are expected to journal about their day. Like, they're expected to write prose.
Crazy.
They can't even read or hold a pencil. I mean, literally, I can't with how much it infuriates me. But anyway, so if you have kids who are expected to do absurdly complicated tasks, like for instance, writing. If you have a kid who's expected to write a paragraph, yet your child has horrible pencil grip, doesn't form their letters properly, can't spell, and is still struggling to sound out words, that is an absurdly inappropriate task for your child. So the only thing parents can do is arm themselves with the knowledge that in order for my child to succeed at school, they have to master basic skills. And so when you watch your child and you see them struggling to sound out words, struggling to, form letters, struggling to act, like they're expected to do math word problems, but they're still counting on their fingers for basic addition and subtraction. All of that is crazy. So you've got to figure out a way to give your kid repeated reinforced practice of basic skills, which is what sometimes if you have the resources, outsource it. Like we have thousands of kids going through fit learning because we make up the gaps that kids that schools don't provide. We give kids repeated reinforced practice to fluency of core skills so that they can never have to be in tutoring again and can be independent, successful kids. But if you can't outsource to a program that is designed to produce mastery and skills so that all of this homework becomes not a nightmare anymore, then you can also supplement with other kinds of online tools like IXL Math. IXL Math is really great. I mean, it's not like being with a learning coach, like a fit learning session, but it's better than nothing. So programs like IXL Math, if you have a kid who's still counting on their fingers, but they're in 3rd or 4th grade or higher, you're in trouble. So you got to get them fluency building, repeated reinforced practice of math facts. If you have a kid who's expected to do decimals and they still don't understand fractions, like that's what schools produce. They skip it. They just push kids ahead and they skip over foundational skills. And then you're in a big fat mess. So notice that. If you have a kid who's like struggling with, like they're working on decimals, but they don't even understand what a fraction is, you gotta get them skill building, get them into IXL, like do an IXL Math program, something like that to give them that repeated reinforced practice of component skills. So that's how you can make up the can't do. Like the can't do side of this is important. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. So doctor, I think, one thing that to think about is like, look to see where your child is struggling,
Yes.
right? Because sometimes we don't know, like, I had that with my daughter. She was counting on her fingers and I was like, I don't think that's right. And she said, no, my teacher said it's fine. And I thought, God. I don't know that that's right. And so that was like a sign to me, but sometimes those signs are not as obvious. As our children get older, we're not on top of them with their work. They're working more independently. But, if you start to see behavior problems, like, if they're having a hard time with online learning, maybe it's about, what class is that?
Yep.
Because maybe it's not all the classes. Maybe it is a deficit in learning. Now, obviously, online learning right now is very difficult. And
it's difficult.
And nobody is going by, in fact, there's a teacher who just commented that she's a teacher and she totally agrees. And she's now teaching remotely and she's kind of thrown away the curriculum and been doing something more like
away. Were they going to fire you? They're not going to fire you.
Students are thriving. Her students are thriving.
I'm sure.
But I think, also giving parents, the information that to keep an eye on where your children are having trouble even focusing. Because typically, when a child is having struggles, they don't want to focus because it's a negative for them.
Well, and they can't. I mean, to be quite like, imagine like, and look, we all take it for granted because we can do this stuff, right? So it makes no sense to us that our kids can't. And so when our kids can't, we automatically make it like you're lazy, you're not trying, like as if it's a behavior problem. But imagine for a child who can barely do math and can't read, being at school is literally synonymous with like us being in a lecture that's in Chinese and we can't speak the language.
It's stressful.
No matter how we look like we're focusing, like even if our eyes are on the lecturer, we don't understand what's happening. Like we have no clue. There's no possibility for us to engage because we literally cannot. Right. So when kids have major skills deficits, there's no amount of, you need to focus or, I'm going to punish you. that doesn't work because the kid doesn't have the skills. Like they have to have the skills to be able to engage. And teachers don't have, and I love this teacher who's just throwing it out. Throw it out. I promise you, you're not going to get fired. There is a dearth of teachers in the United States. I mean, this is what I would say. If there is a group that is the one group that could yield the most power around changing this, it is teachers. If teachers banded together and said, enough is enough, we are not going to continue teaching according to arbitrary timelines. We are not going to follow. We are the experts, not school boards. We are going to determine when kids are ready to move on off of a lesson. We are going to determine, the whole curriculum needs to be revamped. Like all this fluffy garbage you want to teach kindergartners through third graders is a waste of time. We are focusing on arithmetic and reading and writing again from K through third grade. Like teachers could actually demand that. And they have a lot of power because guess what? The education doesn't work without the teachers. So like teachers are the ones that can make some serious change here. And I think I implore you to do that because we are now in a breakdown like we've never been before. And now is a critical time because from a breakdown comes a breakthrough. And like, there's plenty of parents who now see on the front lines how bad it all is. And I think now is the catalyst where a real change can happen because there's a lot of people who are upset. Teachers are upset, parents are upset because nothing's working very well. Things need to change. So I talked about the can't do. So I do want to talk about how to make remote learning better.
Yes.
That's another issue because this is a complicated question, right? So let's to recap. Noticing how your child behaves during schoolwork, right? Are they just staring into space and just not trying? And when you prompt them, they just can complete it fine. Well, then that's a different situation. That's a kid who's like that's a won't do. So if you have a child who procrastinates and stares into space and is just sloppy during schoolwork, but when you sit there and like say, try again, get on task, they can like breeze through their homework. Well, you don't have a skills deficit, you have a behavioral problem. So when you have a won't do, that's a won't do, not a can't do, that's a won't do, then that's when you need to design some powerful reinforcement systems in your household. Because guess what? If I can give parents any advice, and I am a parent, I have two children, a 14-year-old son. I have a picture of him, but I realized how aged this is. Like he's much older than this now. I was like, God, I really need to change out that picture. And then I have a college age daughter. Neither of my children got free access to screens ever. So what I mean by that is this. And I also wrote an article, I think it was for Thrive Global, on becoming the CEO of your household. And you can Google that, CEO of your household, Dr. Kimberly Berens, and it should come up. I can't emphasize how important it is to read this article because we forget that, there's a difference between a right and a privilege. There should be fundamental rights that children have. They should be safe. They should be warm and fed and loved and clothed and supported. Those are the rights of a child. But then there's some privileges like video games, iPhones, iPads, all the other free time stuff they want to do. And we've gotten into a day and age, and it's been a long time coming with this. It's a lot more permissive parenting than it used to be in the 50s and 60s. All of a sudden parents are afraid to say no to their kids. They're afraid to set limits. They're afraid to impose rules. And you know what we're producing? We're producing a generations of what I call kids who are sick with what I like to call affluenza. It's a horrible disease.
Wow,
they're infected with affluenza. And what affluenza is kids who get everything they want when they want it without having to do anything to get it, which is ridiculous. So if you want to train your children to have a work ethic, to be independent, to understand that hard work is required and comes with fun payoffs, but not until you do the hard work, like you got like that's actually trained. That's learned. Kids aren't born with strong work ethics and kids aren't born lazy. Those are behavioral repertoires that are shaped by how we parent. So kids need to be earning access to screen time, period. That is one way to control how much screen time your kids are having. Because we all know it has been all bets are off, right? Like video games, because we got to fill the void so that we can work and do all the stuff we have to do from home. And it's gotten to be chaos. But I'll tell you, now is the time, 2021, January, New Year's resolution, get control over this in your household. because I can't express to you how much better your lives will be and how much more productive and functional your children will be if you manage this. Where there are, they wake up in the morning and there is screen times are put away, like screens are put away at the before they go to bed, and screens stay put away until your children earn certain, or engage in certain requirements in the household. Like they are attentive and participate in their online classes. And that's when the dialogue between teachers and parents become important. Like teachers should be quickly telling parents, how well they did. And I do this for every single fit session because I'm all virtual right now. So I am in constant, my staff is in constant communication with parents because most of my fit kids are earning like screen time or other kinds of requirements at home. So I'm constantly communicating, great session. They earned their screen time for their fit session. So like a quick communication so that teachers can tell parents, they had a great class, and then you could make like each online class, they get a good report is worth 15 minutes of screen time or whatever your exchange rate can be. And then each time you complete your homework without whinging and whining and me having to nag you within a certain time period, like it should take you 20 minutes to do your math homework. And if they get it done in 20 minutes without you having to remind them, then that could be worth screen time. Like think about it as something they are earning, which is the exact reverse of what typically happens, which is kids have free access to it all the time. And then parents are whining. Parents are nagging, kids are whining, it's fights. And then all of a sudden when stuff goes really south, parents punish and like, that's it. You lose it for a week or no screen time for a month, right? Like we do this reactionary, angry removal rather than it's never something that has to be removed because it's never something they always have access to. Just like we all earn a paycheck, we all, there's all stuff we earn. Like we save up to buy that art, something we want, or we save up to whatever we all have to work towards a goal. So kids should be working towards their screen time minutes every day. And you should set it out and make it really clear rules, post it on the fridge, post it on some board in your house. And when kids earn it, then you can check a box or even do it on you can even do it you can use a little project. We have Base Camp. That's a great one where you have like a project that you set up with your kid and all their requirements. And when they complete it, you just tally, you just click a box and then they know how many minutes they have at the end of the day. And then when they earn their free time, that's how many minutes they earned. And guess what? If they fail to meet any of those requirements, it's not a fight. It's not you lost your screen time. It's like, oh man, dude, you're so off today. And it's a real bummer because you didn't earn any of your screen time minutes. So it's okay to try again tomorrow rather than it being some dramatic punishment thing, right?
This is brilliant. Dr. Kim told me about this. I did this with my children. Let me tell you, it is a whole new world. I'm now on their side. I'm cheering for them to get their points. I'm like, come on, Addie, empty the dishwasher. You'll get points. So now my children are emptying the dishwasher. They're taking the garbage out with no fighting.
Yeah, no fighting.
There's sometimes like, oh, do I have to now? I'm like, well, if you want your points.
Yeah.
So it's not me. It's not me who's making them do it. It's their desire to watch screens.
Yes.
So it changes the whole dynamic. I mean, I have to say, it's incredible.
The whole dynamic changes because that's another thing. That's when I think about how hard it is to be a parent, and it is freaking hard. I mean, we all know how hard it is. It's like a really hard job.
Very hard, very hard.
And so what we know about everything in life is if we're not organized and planned and have a plan, that's when everything can go haywire, right? Like when there's not a plan and we're kind of doing it off the cuff and we're dealing with like an emergency, it's always kind of an emergency code red situation for us to respond. Like when you put a screen time plan in place, it allows you to have a healthy, amazing relationship with your kids that's not based on putting out fires and having this emergency, freak out situation, because it's just the plan. Like you're following the plan and you're all on the same team. Like I totally want you to have your fun free time at the end of the day where you get like an hour and a half of screen time so you can be on with your buddies and whatever you want to do. I want that for you. So let's review. What do we got to do today to earn as many minutes as you can? All the, that you go through the things. And that what's so cool is that if they're listed, then you even take yourself out of the equation. because
Yeah.
like they are then learning to initiate on their own. Like, mom, I did the dishwasher. I got my, and then you go check. Yeah, you did. Awesome job. You got your 10 minutes. And they're initiating. So it's teaching initiation. It's teaching independence. It's teaching responsibility. And it's teaching kids to value hard work and learn how to work hard, because kids have to learn that. You're not going to teach them to learn that by them have them laying on the couch, eating Cheetos and playing on their screens all day. Like that doesn't work.
It's amazing. I hear my son pulling the garbage cans from the front to the back, and I'm like, oh my God, that's so exciting. You know, I mean, it's really.
Well, you're a single mom. You're a single mother. They gotta help you.
I was like, I can't do all this myself, but it's also, they feel good. Like they feel part of the family, that there's an ownership to this family.
Yep.
Maura has a question. There was like, do we need to be concerned that these are extrinsic rewards?
No, and that's a big myth.
Good, thank you.
So there's some really toxic myths. There's some, and this is all in my book, but there are some really toxic myths that have gone around out there about rewards. You know, one of the most toxic books that was ever published was something called Punished by Rewards. And it was written by a guy who does not understand behavioral science. So I'm going to tell you this right now. Reinforcement is happening whether you like it or not. And this is something that not a lot of people understand. So whether you like it or not, if you're engaging in a behavior that's pretty prevalent, that behavior has been reinforced and is continuing to be reinforced somewhere in your life. Now, you may not know what the reinforcer is. You may not be able to identify it, but it's being reinforced, because that is how the learning process works. So we have evolved as a species to learn via a very specific interaction with our unique environments. So for instance, we engage in a behavior. That behavior is followed by some consequence, and it may not be designed at all. It may just be something that occurs in the natural environment as a result of we've learned to open a door because when we put our hand on the door and turn it a specific way, it opens. And the door opening is a reinforcer for the motion of putting our hand on the door and turning the knob. So like reinforcement is how we've all become adults. Like all of the behavior we engage in has happened through the principle of reinforcement. And this is a scientific principle. It is a scientific fact. And it's linked to our neurology, because that is actually how neural pathways are formed in the brain. So like a newborn baby, like think about an infant, and I write this in my book, think about an infant in the crib, an infant lying in their crib, right? And there's a mobile hanging over their crib that's kind of within their reach, right? So we've evolved as a species that infants are born moving. Like, have you noticed that? Like infants don't just lie there. Well, sadly, children with profound disabilities do, which is another reason why they struggle to learn, because they don't do anything. They don't do a lot. But neurotypical kids, when they're born, they are constantly moving. They're moving their arms, they're moving their legs, they're moving their mouths, they're looking around, they're moving their heads. The reason we're in motion is because that has had evolutionary advantage for us. Because when you're moving, you're more likely to come into contact with the reinforcer in the environment. And that's what produces the learning process, so that neural pathways start being produced in the brain. That's how it works. So imagine an infant lying in a crib and there's a mobile over their head, and they're just randomly, excuse me, I'm going to do some really ridiculous dance moves. They're just moving I'm a baby in a crib and I'm moving my arms and legs in just a random fashion like babies do. Now just imagine accidentally, not intentionally, because they're babies. They're not doing anything intentionally. They're babies. So they're moving around and accidentally their arm hits that mobile. And as a result, the mobile moves. Now, humans find movement in the visual field to be automatically reinforcing, because again, evolution. Noticing things that move there's beneficial to us, right? So infants are powerfully reinforced by movement, right? So that infant goes like this. So the minute that arm accidentally hits the mobile, that also has a neurological impact in that infant's brain. So arm accidentally hits the mobile moves, that's a reinforcer, boom, something occurs neurologically. That has started a learning process. So that if that infant accidentally does it again, neurological process. Over time, the more that infant accidentally hits that mobile, the more that neurological process happens and a neural pathway is produced. And guess what? That infant doesn't talk, doesn't do anything, but that infant will learn through that process When they go in their crib, they're immediately moving their arm and hitting the mobile. They've learned. That has now become not an accident anymore. It started as an accident, but because of the symbiotic relationship between behavior, reinforcement, and neurology, that has now become a learned behavior. So whenever you hear people talking to you about you shouldn't use extrinsic rewards, you should only use intrinsic reinforcement, that is a lie. Because intrinsic reinforcement is not a thing that exists from birth. Extrinsic reinforcement is learned, and it's learned as a function of extrinsic reinforcement, right? Like, it's not like that infant was like extrinsically motivated to move that mobile. No, their arm just accidentally hit it, and that motion was reinforcing, and so it occurred over and over again. That's how learning works. So thinking that you're going to change your children's behavior and get them by just reasoning with them and trying to make them like understand the importance of being a contribution to the household. No, they're not going to get that. You know how they're going to get that? By behaving that way and having that behavior followed by reinforcement. And then guess what? The more they behave that way, just like what Elizabeth is describing with her kids, the more they behave that way and it's been reinforced, guess what happens? That behavior becomes a habit. That's how habits are produced. So now your kids are going to be habitually contributing to the household. And you probably, and you know, using those extrinsic reinforcers are going to become less necessary. Why? Because you've established a positive habit. But to establish a positive habit, you got to use reinforcement. Learning doesn't work without it. It's a fact. So anyone who tells you that extrinsic reinforcers are bad doesn't know anything about behavioral science and is it misinformed, because the only way learning works is with reinforcement. So remember how I talked about the kids who get really good at their math facts and all they want to do is their math facts? Well, now you could say that they're intrinsically motivated to do their math facts. But what it really means is they have that behavior of becoming fluent in math facts was so successfully reinforced using extrinsic reinforcers that has become a habit that no longer requires extrinsic reinforcement. Engaging in the behavior itself has become the reinforcer. That's what extrinsic motivation is. There's still a reinforcer. The reinforcer is just now doing the behavior because they're good at it. But to get kids that good, you gotta be reinforcing them with something. So I gotta tell you, you're gonna be spinning your wheels for a long time as a parent if you're not using powerful extrinsic reinforcers to shape and reinforce the behaviors you want your kids engaging in. Doesn't work.
That is such a doable, actionable thing that we can all do in our families and be able to use this learning. So, I mean, I want to keep you here all day.
Gosh,
but
I don't know how long it's been. I'm just feeling like a time warp.
You have a busy day, but we are going to send out contact information about Fit Learning. I can also say that my children have been doing Fit Learning, and honestly, the first time I heard Dr. Kim speak, I was blown away, and they look forward to it. After an entire day of school, they're excited to do more learning, and they are excited about winning their rewards and doing what they do. They love it. They love it. So it really is incredible.
So happy about her math test.
She got 20 out of 20 and she's been doing all her homework right. And I mean, amazing. This is my daughter who was having a lot of trouble with math, and it was really hurting her feelings.
A lot of this.
And it was hurting her feelings about herself and about school. And I was seeing how someone who loved school so much was starting to hate it.
Well, she's such a dazzling, bright kid. And I can't stand it when a kid like that feels like she's stupid.
It's unfair, and we lose too many great kids get lost really for something that shouldn't be.
I do feel like I need to wrap up with one thing that I never have to talk about. So one thing I never talked about is having your kids succeed in an online class. That was one of the hanging chads because I went off on a few tangents.
Yes.
So one piece of advice I have for teachers who are watching and parents who are watching. So for teachers who are watching, and for parents to be powerful communicators with their teacher, just remember that for learning to happen, behavior must be reinforced. And what that means is that in a class, your students should be doing most of the behaving, not you. So when you're in a lecture, remember that if you're talking, and then every once in a while you ask a question and then you make the kids raise their hand and you give one kid the opportunity to answer, you've only given that one kid the opportunity to respond and receive reinforcement. None of the other kids in the class have. And so I cannot emphasize enough, and I do tons of teacher trainings, I do tons of teacher workshops. If there's one little thing that I know transforms the impact of instruction, is getting rid of hand raising and using direct instruction, where you are rapidly presenting things to the class that they all answer in unison. And if that's too hard to do on Zoom, then have them having whiteboards and writing the answers and holding them up or typing it into the chat. So like there's lots of ways to have the whole class responding so that you're doing less of the talking and your kids are doing more of the behaving, so that you can give them reinforcement for that behavior. And it also gives you immediate feedback on the effectiveness of your instruction. Because if you have a ton of kids who can't answer your question or who are sitting there staring into space, well, that's really important information for you to know, oh my God, I need to represent that question in a different way, or I need to, slice back a little bit and ask it in a simpler way. So, something as simple as like teaching vowels. I train my entire team at Fit Learning. It is a one-to-one correspondence between teacher talk and student answers. My team is trained to give 20 learning opportunities per minute in concept instruction. So everything my coaches say, kids are saying back. So for instance, we're going to talk about vowels. You pretend, Elizabeth, you're a kid. We're going to talk about vowels. What are we talking about?
Vowels.
Really good. There are 5 vowels. How many vowels?
5 vowels.
Really good. Are there 4 vowels? Yes or no?
No.
Are there 3?
No.
How many?
5.
Awesome job. Your vowels are A, E, I, O, and U. What do your vowels? Say it.
A, E, I, O, and U.
Awesome. Really good. Like that. So that is how every classroom instruction should go. It shouldn't be hand raising. That is one of the most tragic traditions in education. Giving one kid the opportunity to answer when the entire class needs to learn and they all need to be engaged. What I just did is something called direct instruction. And it has been empirically validated since the 1970s as the most effective way of teaching concepts in classrooms. So when you use that, not only are kids learning because they're behaving and they're receiving reinforcement, but they're engaged and they're having fun. And you can move at a fast pace and present questions in really cool ways and like try to trick them. Kids love it. They love direct instruction. So if I can implore educators right now is the time to really like get out of your comfort zone, look up, Google direct instruction, look up videos. You'll see teachers doing it. It is such a great way to redesign your classrooms live, but especially Zoom. You should be doing this all the time. It's a game changer. It is a game changer for you as a teacher. And then as parents, I would watch your kids' classes. If I know you're busy, watch one. I want you to count. I want you to time how long the class is. And I want you to count how many opportunities your child actually had to respond to that lesson. And I promise you, it's not going to be 20 because 20 is crazy. And that's what we do. But gosh, help us. I guarantee you it's probably going to be 3 or 5 at most. It's crazy. So I want you to be armed with that information so that you can go to your teacher and say, hey, I was watching I know my child's not learning much. They're not engaged, but I watched a class and she only had the opportunity to participate 3 times. She just sat there staring like the whole 50 minutes. Like I'm going to ask you if you could possibly use if you could please use direct instruction methods so that my child is more engaged in your class. You are a consumer of educational services. You should demand better. Teachers want to do better and everyone benefits from feedback. So don't be afraid to ask for it. Don't be afraid to be a parent that says, please do better. Please use direct
that you should ask for direct teaching.
Direct instruction.
Direct instruction.
Capital D, capital I. It's an instructional methodology that's been around for a really long time and it's highly effective, has a lot of science behind it. And basically that's what it is. It's rapid fire teacher talk. The whole class responds. Then the whole class gets reinforcement, right? Like, what are your vowels? A, E, I, O, U. Great, that's right. Those are your vowels. That's reinforcement, right?
Wow. This has been incredible per usual, but
Oh.
we really have things that we can do, that we can implement, whether we're teachers or we're parents, to be able to advocate for our children and for teachers to be able to make changes so they can be more effective, and ways that we can go forward in our household and set up a reward system where we can be on our kids' side and create
Yeah.
peace and harmony and happiness and success in
Yeah.
school and at home. So thank you so much, Dr. Kim. I love when you join us. This has been amazing. We
My
are going
pleasure.
to share your contact information. We're going to be sending out an email within 24 hours that everyone will get. Everyone's begging for the link to your article that you did for working moms. So I'm going to get that, and I will include that as well. So everyone will get the
And
link.
I will, and you know, what's might be easier if they just go to my website, because there's the Fit Learning website, right? fitlearning.com. So that's the website for my organization. And there's also my website. So drkimberlyberens.com. All of my articles I've written live on there. So if you go on my website and you go to press, you'll see, you know, press, and then you'll see articles. All of my article links are on there. So anything I've ever written is you can just click a link right from my website. So that might be easier.
Oh my God, yes, that's a treasure trove.
Yeah,
So
and if you go to the Dr. Kimberly Berens website, my news interviews are on there. Other webinars I've done are on there. Podcasts I've done are on there, and my articles. So it's kind of all lives in
I
one
will
place.
share that. I will share that. That's a better idea. So I'll share your website there. If people didn't write it down now, don't worry about it. Oh, someone put it already in the chat. Nice. Thank you, Ruth.
Nice. Thank you, Cruz.
But I'll still share it again. And then also, this has been recorded and it will be available within 48 hours on the Schneps Media YouTube channel. So you can watch it, you can share it with your friends, family, community, teachers, etc. And I suggest you certainly do. Thank you. I feel remotivated again to keep advocating and to keep working with my kids. So many people are saying amazing webinars.
Oh, good. I'm so glad.
Again, pick up Dr. Berens' book, Blind Spots, Why Students Fail and the Science That Can Help Save Them or Can Save Them. This is a great book. You can pick that up too. Is it available on Kindle?
Yeah, so that's all those links are also on my website. So if you do the Dr. Kimberly Berens one, you'll see all the ways to order the book on the homepage. So
okay, terrific. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you everyone for joining us. Please everyone stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful afternoon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.